is a really good friend of mine. She's a very good friend of mine. She's a clinical lead for Just a Thought, which is quite a cool little digital tool. If you're not aware of it, you need to go check it out. But more importantly, she's one of these people that keeps me on the straight and narrow, holds me to account on the things I say and do, which we need those people in our lives. And she's got a real heart for people, and especially people who've been through significant traumas in their life. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Anna because she's better at this stuff than I am. So Anna, the floor is yours.
Kia ora, everybody. It's so lovely to have everybody here, and I'm just sorry that we're not all in one big space so I can see all your beautiful faces. But anyway, I'll keep flicking through on the little tab and see. Most people have got their cameras turned off, but I can see a couple of lovely faces in there. Please do make this interactive in terms of throwing forward questions, and I'm going to do a bit of a presentation at the start to go through some information that I hope is going to be helpful to you, and then afterwards we're going to have a bit of a kōrero, so feel free to throw up some questions, and Sean and I will discuss them, and you can put forward some suggestions and ideas too. So as Sean said, I'm Anna, nurse by background, CBT therapist, from Dunedin originally, and I'm now living up in Pukekohe. I'm a mother of 2 crazy, spirited children. So they've been doing my absolute head in lockdown, bless them. Thank goodness that this is their first day since I'm an essential worker back at school. So having a little wee mini celebration. But yeah, just wanting to say to everyone else that's still in Auckland in level 3, or anyone that happens to be in level 2 that's really struggling, because obviously level 2's got its limitations as well, just sending you out some aroha. So look, today I'm going to just put a bit of a disclaimer. I'm going to be talking about all of our shared experiences here. So I'm going to be talking about some of mine. And we're going to be just discussing the challenges that we have as human beings and some of the ways we can try and get ahead of this. So I'm going to share my screen, but please just look after yourself today. That's the little disclaimer. This may be triggering for some of you in terms of things that you're going through at the moment, things that you've been through over a period of time. So just take care of yourself. And if you notice that this touches on anything and causes you any distress, please just, be gentle to yourself, think about what you need to look after that distress, and put it in place, whatever it might be. Don't forget our wonderful helplines out there like 1737 with a bunch of different people that are on the phone to talk to, and all the other support helplines that are out there. So without further ado, this webinar today is around the concept of how we get out of the way of ourselves by committing to what matters. So what I'm talking about getting out of the way of ourselves is going to become clear as we go along today. But it's basically the concept that most of us put in front of ourselves obstacles and hurdles that make our lives harder. And, we may realize some of these, or we may not. But today I'm just going to try and shed some light. Look, there is going to be some practical sides to this session, but a lot of it is actually around, trying to turn on that light bulb for all of us, to start to become more aware and reflect on what's happening. And there's no time more important to do that than now with what's going on. Because if we don't know how to tune into ourselves, if we don't have that level of awareness of what's happening, then we're going to struggle a lot more. And so, of course, this is as much for you as it is for also helping you in the work that you may be doing out there in the world. So, first of all, so the reality that all of us have experienced something in life that holds us back. So as you can imagine, that's broad and wide. It might be that we've had childhood adverse experiences as we were growing up, different types of trauma or challenges in our relationships with those adults that were supposed to be looking after us. It might be that we've been in historically abusive relationships. It might be that some of those relationships are still going on at the moment that are challenging. We may have experienced rejection and exclusion in our lives, whether that's as children through school, whether that's through the workplace with bullying, whether that's within our families, periods of time where we just were made to feel that we didn't fit in and where we were maybe isolated from others. We may have lost something precious to us, whether that was a role, our health, someone, in our lives that we lost a relationship, whatever it might be. And, everyone experiences disappointments and failures. And of course, some of those disappointments and failures are pretty significant and can have major impacts. And also emotional neglect. So where our emotional needs weren't met, where, someone integral that was in a role where perhaps part of their responsibility was to be able to tune in and support us emotionally, and they didn't. And, bullying, which I just touched on before. So all of us sitting here today have had some experience or another that can hold us back in life today. And we're going to think about, how does that happen? How does that stuff show up? And what impact does it have on us today? And how can we try to step ahead of it or step around it? So, part of the time we get to smell the roses.
Is that because my computer sound is muted?
Can I just get everybody, sorry, just to, if muted. Everyone puts themselves
on. Is that
on,
the one that's not you? Are you going?
There we go. Okay, so part of the time we manage to enjoy life, right? And when things are tickety-boo and rocking along, we get to experience positive emotions. We get to feel in control of life. We get to feel, relatively happy. Things feel like they're going well, and we can maybe even be present. We can notice and pay attention to what's going on around us and not be stuck in our heads, so that we get a chance to smell the roses. But at some stage or another, that can't go on forever. And some of the challenges we've experienced in life have a way of showing up again and showing up into our awareness. So that's just the reality of it. And of course, the most of the time when these things show up is when life isn't going so well, when something's happened, when maybe we've made a mistake, something we're struggling in a relationship. And those old experiences tend to resurface and show up again. So the challenge is that when we tend to look out for I've just moved all my stuff. It was in the way of the writing. The challenge is that we tend to look out in life for these events happening again as we go through. So what does that mean? If you think about whatever it might be that you've experienced, what does it mean to look out for them again? Well, firstly, we know that as human beings, we use our past experiences to understand and to help us to predict what's going on now and what's going to happen in the future. So if you think about a child that touches a hot stove with their hand, they're going to imprint that memory and all of that experiences, including, what they were, what was happening, what the pain was like, what it felt like, into their memories to try and help them avoid to do the same thing again. And so our memories and our memory system basically is there to try to protect us, to remember the stuff that was unpleasant or unsafe or really painful or had some sort of threat to us, so that we can attempt to try and avoid it. So that's helpful, right, in some ways, but in others, it's not so helpful. Because the challenge is that when we've experienced something that was dangerous or that was threatening to us in whatever way, whether it was physically threatening or emotionally threatening, we tend to overestimate the level of threat in situations going forward, and we can really underestimate our ability to cope. So, our minds aren't necessarily great at looking at a really balanced view of things that could go wrong. When we're in a situation that's difficult and our distress goes up, we don't look at things very clearly, and we tend to become threat focused. Our brains look out for what's going to go wrong. They don't necessarily pay attention to what's going well and what might work out, because we don't need to think about those things. They're not dangerous to us. And also when it comes to looking at ourselves and understanding our own sort of resources and our own ability to cope, we tend to forget at those times when we're in that difficult space about the times that it's gone well before, the qualities of the resources or the skills that we have. So we tend to underestimate our ability to cope. We worry we're not going to be able to do something. We worry we're not going to be able to cope if something happens. And so this can really sort of spiral us down into quite an anxious space. And we're also good at attaching sometimes danger to situations where it isn't. So I'll give you a really good example of this. In my life, sort of growing up with one parent that was at times really unpredictable in terms of where their moods would be at and what was going to happen, and wanting to avoid some of the negative wrath of that, you would find yourself, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this as well with one or both of your parents or some of the people in your life. You tend to get good at predicting and trying to avoid difficult situations with them and running certain safety behaviours. So it's interesting when I get an email from my boss, when I've had one that's come over the time, Anna, I want to come and catch up with you at 2:00. Can you come into my room and we'll have a sit down and a talk? Where does my mind go? Well, almost 8 times out of 10, and obviously it depends what the boss is like and what my experiences have been like in the past, but it will run to, I'm in trouble. What's going to happen? I've done something wrong. And so that's a really good example of where we can sometimes attach a sense of danger and anxiety to a situation where there may be none whatsoever. Perhaps, I'm being told about something that's coming up, or there's an opportunity, or maybe I'm even being praised about something. But of course, my brain is going to run to expecting that something bad's going to happen. So when that goes on, this leaves us often thinking, acting and feeling in the present moment today as if we are back experiencing these events again. So going back to my scenario, when I get that email and I expect that I'm, about to get in trouble or I've done something wrong, of course, I'm basing that on times previous, because if I'd had lots of lovely situations where, there hadn't been that happening, then I wouldn't necessarily have those experiences and memories to be jumping to that conclusion with. So when that happens and we tend to be looking at the present through that lens of the past and what's gone on, whether we realize that we're doing it or not, because it can happen very subconsciously where we have no awareness that those memories are sort of being triggered and we're feeling in that same way, it can really lead us into some vicious cycles where we spiral into really negative thinking that gets quite twisted and distorted by those fears and those past experiences that, where we don't sort of see what's going on, but we instead get stuck looking at things from a catastrophic view. And of course, when that happens, our distress heightens and we can get stuck using coping behaviours that just don't work very well for us at all. So I've just got some examples here based on these little slides. So down on the bottom left is this woman that's overworking. She's working too hard. She's putting in all these extra hours because she's worried she's not going to get something right. Or the guy down on the bottom right hand who's on his phone and he's texting at a party instead of going and talking, where perhaps he may be worried about saying something wrong or not being liked, and so he's avoiding, or losing ourselves in our minds and worry and anxiety, which is another way that we try to cope, thinking that if we can worry enough and think through all the scenarios, we can try to avoid it. Unfortunately, most of the time when we're worrying, we don't often come up with good solutions. We just feel worse and worse as we expose ourselves to all of those anxious thoughts. And then on the right, which, some of you during lockdown may have found yourself in, getting swamped down, either scrolling through phones and getting lost on Facebook feeds or into Netflix series and just sort of escaping. So these things, they don't necessarily help us in the long term. They may have some support in the short term, but maybe in the long term the problem's still there and it hasn't changed. So the challenge is that this sort of keeps us stuck when we aren't able to be aware of what's going on and sort of be a bit more insightful and think a bit more proactively about what we do about it. So it either keeps us stuck in the past, where we're sort of worrying or thinking through what's happened previously, or applying that to thinking what's going to happen today, or we may be projecting things into the future and worrying about what's going to go on and being concerned about how we're going to cope and what are the outcomes of that going to be. So, of course, when we're either stuck in the past or we're stuck in the future, we're only in our minds, because you can't experience the past or the future anywhere else but through our thinking and our imaginations. So, of course, we're not present. We are not where we are today. And there's a huge problem with that, because, life really is happening right now in this moment. You can't go back and relive the past, and you can't jump into the future. So when you're not present, we're often missing out on what's going on now. And really interestingly, and I wouldn't say necessarily that at the moment for COVID, but in some ways, what's happening right now isn't too bad. Maybe what's going on right now isn't catastrophic. Maybe it is manageable. So, for most of us, we struggle to be present. And of course, that means that we miss out on being present with our families or being present in enjoyable moments. And we're just stuck inside our heads. So this can create really huge barriers to doing the things that we want to do in life. So this is just this little cartoon sort of looks at a woman that's sitting there at work and she's thinking about something she'd love to do. Maybe it's a promotion or a new job where she gets to sort of have these exciting new roles. But of course, that anxious brain, if she's has a sense of herself that she couldn't do it, or that things might go wrong or people might judge her, if that begins to show up and she gets stuck looking at that future situation and that opportunity through that lens, then her sort of first safety behavior might be, well, I won't go for it. I won't get the job. Or if I got the job, I wouldn't be any good at it. And my colleagues would think that I was just a fraud and I was, and they wouldn't respect me. So, it can really hamper our experiences in life. It can absolutely shape what we go for and what we get out of life if we get stuck in those vicious cycles. As those vicious cycles go on, they also tend to gather momentum, which increases our distress and means that it starts to impact on lots of different parts of our life. So in the example of someone worrying that they're a failure and things aren't going to work out, you can imagine that they might decide, well, what's the point of getting out of bed? I'm just going to stay in bed and I'm just going to avoid doing anything today because there's no point. Things aren't going to work out. And so, of course, the more that someone gets stuck seeing the world in that way and starting to disengage and isolate, then, of course, the worse they begin to feel. The more depressed, the more tired, and so that vicious cycle can go on. And, of course, relationships as well get affected. They get harder as we begin to doubt ourselves and criticize ourselves. And our interactions with other people change as, we begin to behave in a way that doesn't really work for us. So this is another good little vicious cycle that a lot of us can find ourselves in, where we may think, well, other people are taking advantage of me, things aren't working out, why can't I stand up for myself? And so feeling tense and edgy and maybe angry at ourselves, and so trying to avoid conflict. Or on the other hand, maybe becoming sort of quite angry and resentful and acting out on that. So there's lots of different ways in which we can get stuck in these vicious cycles in life with these belief systems and these thoughts about ourselves and other people and the world and what's going to happen that really don't work for us and get us quite stuck. So when we look at how this impacts us on a day-to-day basis. The way that we interact with our thoughts, what we think about, the ways that we think about the future or what's happened in the past, and that emotional distress that we can experience really dictates the level of stress that we have. But it also has a major impact on the amount of insight and awareness that we can have at any given time. Largely, you can't get a perspective on something, and that's whether that's a situation or what's happening for ourselves, if you're absolutely stuck in it. It's a bit like distress, creates those blinkers that only allows you to see things in a certain way. And going back, that's very much about that survival instinct. When we get in high levels of distress, our minds only look out for the worst things that are going to happen in those situations. And so we don't have that lovely flexible view. And so it can become really difficult to have awareness at those times, and a sense of, what other choices that we might have. Also, it absolutely dictates the amount of choices that we see of what we can do next, through that reduction in the way that we see things. It can also have an impact on lots of other aspects of our physical health, because stress and anxiety and those challenges have a major impact on all of our hormones, on our cardiovascular system, on our brains, because of the way that stress, works, and just how weighty and how heavy it is. It also dictates the rules and the expectations that we create in life, the way that we run at things, in terms of, well, if I do this, then this will happen, or if I, keep everyone happy, or if I say yes to everything, then people will like me. And as you can imagine, running a role like that, which a lot of people do that tend to get into self-sacrificing, it doesn't work for very long, because most of the time people don't necessarily pay you back when you've given them lots of time and done lots of things for them. And so you end up feeling worse sometimes than when you started, when you notice that you're doing all this stuff for people and they're not necessarily paying you back or recognizing you for it. And it absolutely impacts on the behaviors that we choose and our very experience of life itself. So one of the big challenges that we have is that we're not very good at managing distress, and we're also not even very good at being willing to have it. We're primed in society to feel happy all the time. We're comparing ourselves to other people constantly and what they've got going on, how they're experiencing life. And we really feel that, a lot of our emotions aren't okay to have. So one example of this is when you ask someone, how are you today? What is the answer that most of us immediately give? I'm okay, thanks. It's not necessarily the truth of what's happening for us. We don't necessarily say, oh, well, actually, I'm feeling a bit rubbish. I'm feeling a bit sad today, And why don't we say that? Because we don't feel it would be socially acceptable. We worry about what the other person might think if we actually told them. And so we're constantly interacting in society with each other like certain emotions aren't okay, that successful people wouldn't have them, or productive people wouldn't have them, likable people wouldn't have them. And so we get good at trying to avoid them, and we start being unwilling to have them. But this is hugely problematic for us because emotions don't tend to go away. You can distract yourself or avoid them for a certain period of time, but there's a really helpful saying around distress that, that what you resist persists. And that is absolutely true. What you're unwilling to feel, you're unable to do anything about, you're unable to heal. So, when we spend a whole lot of time being unwilling to have distress, whether it's on a day-to-day basis, about what's going on now or things that have happened in the past, it makes it really hard to have a level of self-awareness because you want to avoid yourself. But with sitting with yourself and having a sense of what's happening for you means that you have to tune into what's going on for you in terms of your emotional system. So people tend to not be very good at tuning into themselves when they're unwilling to feel distress. Which means, of course, that you can't have a lovely, flexible way of seeing things, and you're often struggling in those moments to regulate that distress because you can't regulate what you're not willing to face, right? What you're not willing to sit with. So distress intolerance, or this unwillingness to have distress, is really common in human beings, but it's really self-limiting. It basically reduces our experiences in life. We don't get to have as many rich experiences, and sometimes we even opt out of experiences that we could have because we just don't want to feel that distress, that anxiety, that sadness, that anger, whatever it might be. And of course, if some of these emotions are coming from pivotal things that have happened to us over time, that we're being reminded of, or we're reliving at times through our situations today, we don't get to shift them. We don't get to work on what we term sort of our baggage. So there isn't that same ability for growth as we get older. It's funny, when I was younger, I used to imagine that everyone over the age of 60 were these incredible, wise, compassionate people because they'd had all this time to grow and to learn and to shift and change stuff that doesn't work. And it wasn't until I was in, my sort of later 20s that I realized that it's absolutely possible to be in your 80s and to still be really stuck. And look, you can only get there by denying distress and not wanting to do anything with it. Because basically emotions do really help us. They signal to us about what's going on and what we might need to be paying attention to. Certain emotions may also be less tolerable to us because of our earlier experiences and the ways that our family ran at distress. There may have been some emotions that were okay to have and to show, and other emotions that you just didn't tell anyone else about. And of course, all of this has a massive impact on us as we grow through the years. So what changes can make a real difference when we've had those early experiences, or we've struggled over life with major things that leave those sort of real indelible marks on us, and in terms of what we do, how we see things, how we feel. Firstly is around learning to tune in and connect into ourselves on a moment-to-moment basis, being able to pay attention and be aware. If we think about it, for those of us who have really close friendships, or we've raised children, or we have partners, we can't have helpful impacts on those people unless we pay attention to what's going on and we get a sense of what they're going through. We tune into them, and it's exactly the same for us. We've got to get good at doing that. Also, growing awareness around what are our belief systems. How do we see ourselves when things are going well and when things aren't going well? How do we see other people? How do we see the world, and how do we see our future? What are those core beliefs that we hold, that we grew up with, that really shape how that we go into the world? And, be aware, most of us will have two different sets of those belief systems. A set of beliefs when things are going well, when we get out on the right side of bed and life's easier, where we feel that we're likable and worthy and we enjoy other people and we believe they've got something to offer us, and relationships are going to be positive and the world is an exciting place, and the future has got good things in it for us, good things are in store. Or that set of beliefs when we tend to get up on the wrong side of bed, when they get downloaded all the times that things haven't worked out and we feel that we're not good enough, or we don't know if we can trust others or if they'll like us. If we, where we see the world as just being an unfair place that's cruel, and where things don't work out, and where we don't believe that things are going to go okay in the future. most of us will swing between those two different sets of belief systems that we have depending on what's going on in our lives and what's happening. So absolutely getting aware of what are those beliefs that can get turned on sometimes when things are difficult can really help us to begin to shift them. And then as well, being clear on what matters to us. This is our real anchors in life. You know, our values work very much in life to help ground us, to help us to have a focus in life, and to keep that balance as well. So being clear about what matters and being able to connect in every day to those things that are valuable to us is really essential to our well-being. And lastly, being okay not being okay. So you would have heard this before, but it really is growing a willingness for all of our emotions, including distress, becoming okay and accepting that as a human being, we can't avoid distress. And often there's nothing wrong with it. People don't get upset for no reason. You know, we all have something behind it. So just thinking about that, you know, this choice that we have, and it really is a choice to approach all of your emotions with a sense of openness and curiosity, really looking for messages that you need to pay attention to with it. So I always say to people that our emotions and distress is very much like pain in our body. We don't experience them for no reason. And most of the time when distress shows up, just like pain, it's signaling that something's not going right. You know, if you think about it, if you're sitting on your leg and you start getting those pins and needles, it's signaling to you that you're cutting off the blood supply, and it's giving you a sense that maybe you need to change your position. Maybe you shouldn't be sitting on that leg because it's going dead, and it's getting painful and uncomfortable. And so, you know, distress is just the same. It might be telling us when it shows up that you're neglecting yourself. There may be a part of your life or something that you're not doing that you need to be doing, some sort of self-care or something that's not working for you. And so maybe you need to listen to it and make some changes. Perhaps distress is talking to you around a state of imbalance that's happening in your life. Maybe you're burning out. Maybe you're working too hard. Maybe you've got no time for yourself. Maybe you're missing out on, you know, key times with people that matter to you that you need to look at shifting and changing. Perhaps there's a situation that's going on that doesn't fit with your values. Something where your values are being compromised, either someone putting you in that situation or you finding yourself in that situation. Or maybe there's something in the past, you know, that's happened to you that's still showing up today when it gets triggered by situations and people that remind us of it, that we still need to look after, you know, that has pain attached to it that we need to continue to process. I'm a real believer that really, I think, you know, one of our purposes in life is to grow and to learn. And these things that happen to us along life, you know, these experiences really teach us and help to shape us in a positive direction if only we pay attention to them and we pay attention to the impacts they've had on us and we work through them. You know, I think that's why Mental Health Awareness Week and periods of time like this where we celebrate our mental well-being, but we also pay attention and take time to acknowledging that life is sometimes shit, you know, and things go wrong and bad things happen, and that can be hugely impacting on us, and it can leave scars, and that it's really normal sometimes to suffer. But we can really choose how much we get stuck in that and where we go from there. But we have to start by paying attention. Get to know your own vicious cycles. This is a really important one. You know, get to know how you get stuck. What are the behaviors that you sometimes revert to automatically that don't work for you, that don't actually help you in the long term, that only are just quick fixes, but that maybe get you further stuck in the situation? What are some of the ways of thinking that you get stuck in that aren't realistic, that aren't helpful, that aren't based on all the evidence and all the facts, that maybe is sort of a story that you were given to yourself by someone else over time who wasn't in a good space and sort of projected that stuff onto you that you've picked up and you're now walking with. And what does that look like in your body? How do you feel at those times, and how does it impact on your moods? Get to know the vicious cycles that you get stuck in and work out where are the intervention points. What could you do differently that would make it, change that outcome? What are the thoughts that you can work with and that you can try to challenge and try to shift and get more balanced that will make a real difference to how you feel? And look back to step forward. So, be aware of those experiences that you've been through in life that still shape the way that you go out into the world every day. And don't be ashamed to think of those things, and don't get stuck into the whole, well, I should be over it by now. I think that a lot of the stuff that happens to us in life, whether it's someone passing away or an abusive relationship or a significant loss or childhood bullying, we spend the rest of our lives looking after. So it's not necessarily something that we can just turn off and boom, we're fine, we're okay. That doesn't happen. So be aware of those things that you've survived, that you've lived through, and give yourself permission to sometimes still struggle with them, whether it's 1 year later, 6 years later, 20 years later. Maybe that's, part of life, is sort of really learning to live with that stuff and shift it. So what have been the most positive and negative events and relationships in your life? And how do they influence your perspectives and your behaviors? How do they get into your head sometimes still today? We all have those negative core beliefs and those go-to protective behaviors that really just don't work for us. And I think really a big part of our journey as human beings is to learn and discover that stuff that doesn't work and try to really shift it. I'm a big believer that leopards can change their spots if they want to, if they do that consciously. So we're all capable of shifting this stuff and creating awareness and identifying practical steps to changing them. So, become aware of the ways that your beliefs and past experiences make you look at yourself and other people, the world and the future when things are hard, so that it can give you a better chance of living and being able to see the silver lining and noticing when the sun does come out, which, of course, it always does. Start to notice what's going on for you and be kind to yourself as well. Start to learn to show up for yourself when that distress is there. We can't be willing to have distress unless we get good at looking after it. So self-compassion is a massive part of this, trying to grow this for ourselves. So start paying attention to what is going on in your mind and your body with your feelings when you're in a state of stress or distress, and ask yourself questions like, what's going through my mind right now? What am I worrying about and thinking about? What impact are my behaviors having on me right now? Is what I'm trying to do to get out of this experience helpful, or is it not, in the long term and of course in the short term? And how am I viewing myself and other people right now? Am I being fair? Am I being realistic? What past experiences are dictating my perspectives and behaviors today? Is there anything that's showing up right now? Am I sort of reliving a past experience or an old relationship and sort of feeling like it's happening today? What rules and expectations am I operating? Is the things I'm expecting of myself or other people at the moment, are they realistic and helpful, or are they just creating further problems? And what situations really matter most to me at the moment? What is the most important thing for me here? And that might be something in the situation, or it might actually be something else. The number of times we get caught worrying about problems and events or arguments or whatever it might be, and we don't step back to ask ourselves, will this really matter in 6 months? Will this matter in 2 years? a helpful one when if I have some discord or, some difficulties with someone in a relationship, I think, am I going to want this person at my next birthday? Am I going to hope that they're there at my kid's 21st? Do they really matter to me? And if I say, well, no, I wouldn't want them at my birthday at all, I would never invite them, then I sort of have to ask myself, well, why am I worrying so much about their opinion at the moment? If I've done everything that I can in line with my values and I've acted the way that I want to, that I can feel, respectful of myself, then maybe I can sort of let it go. And what do I need to do right now to look after this distress I'm feeling? So that's a really important question, and it helps us become more willing to have distress, and it also helps us to work ourselves through it. How do I need to look after myself and show up for myself right now to regulate some of that? So in terms of the value-based stuff, if you haven't already come across Russ Harris's website, The Happiness Trap, he's got a book with it. He's an acceptance and commitment therapy expert. He's got a really lovely worksheet on his website, thehappinesstrap.com, all about values, taking you through all of the different areas in your life and thinking about how you're doing, how well you're going with those areas. And this bullseye is a really beautiful way to visually show how well and consistently you're living in line with those values and how balanced it is. So I tend to do this about every 6 months to get a sense of how I'm tracking. It's just a really nice way to think about, how am I going in my work and, in my learning? How am I going in my own life or looking after my health? How well are my relationships tracking in terms of the sort of mom or the sort of partner or friend or whatever that I want to be? And how am I going in my sort of hobbies and my leisure and the stuff that I need to be doing for me? So that's a really cool little resource to use. Once you have your sights set on where you want to go in life in terms of what matters to you and the sort of person, partner, friend, wife, husband, grandmother, grandfather, whatever it might be, colleague, of what really, where you want to be going in life, build a ladder of the steps to get there. What do you need to do? How can we begin to take small incremental steps to begin to shift some of the stuff we need to shift, to begin to allow ourselves to become the person that we want to be? And we're talking here about realistic expectations, obviously, and the fact that it's a 5 steps forward, 3 steps back process. Nothing ever improves and improves and improves. There's always those periods of time where it gets difficult and we struggle. So be prepared for those challenges along the way, but choose not to let them stop you. I think, when we set out expecting there to be difficulties, expecting periods of time when it's hard, then it's much easier when those times show up because we're not disappointed and we don't necessarily take that as a sense that we're failing. We just say, this is just part of the process. Make sure you regularly schedule in time for the things that matter most to you, because it's funny, how often we think, well, when I've done all my work, when I'm in a better place, when I've gotten on top of all of my to-do list, then I'll spend some great time with the kids, or I'll do that lovely thing that I've wanted to do with myself. We're really good at putting off stuff that matters to us and making it conditional based on a whole bunch of things being marked off our to-do list or going well. That to-do list is never going to get finished. There's always going to be something that you want to change. There's always going to be something that's challenging or isn't quite as you want it. So don't put the stuff off that matters. Schedule it into your days, whether that's getting up early and having a beautiful cup of tea in a lovely sunny spot with a paper or whatever it is on your own, or, putting on that beautiful dress or outfit or whatever it might be, doing something really special. And have as well your go-to skills and ways of managing when challenges face up. Arm yourself in advance and know what you can do when things get difficult. So, this slide has come from one of our Just a Thought courses. There's lovely problem-solving tools like Auntie D out there. There's tools like Just a Thought. There's all sorts of worksheets that can help us to practically get stuck in and work through anxious thoughts that we might get stuck in, work to change behaviours that we always do but that we know never really helps us, and to help to work out how to really practically run at problems that we need to change rather than just worrying about them. Most of all, stop the self-criticism. It doesn't do anything. It really just disables you from taking steps, because it helps you, it makes you feel defeated, and it takes away hope in situations. So be kind, be kind, be kind. I sound like Jacinda Ardern then, but it's a really important message. Be kind to yourself, and that also helps you to be kind to others when we're kind to ourselves. We're wanting to grow awareness and that insight, to be able to see things flexibly. We don't want to be getting caught up with our thoughts and our actions. We want to be able to connect in and be aware of what's going on today. We need to be identifying in situations whether what we're doing and what we're thinking lines up with where we want to be going. Otherwise, we find ourselves getting off track really easily. And being able to hold other people in mind as well, not losing sight of other people in situations, and being able to make adjustments to stuff as we need to, because situations change, new information comes to light. And so this is what being really flexible and having that self-awareness can give us. And last but not least, getting support. Do reach out for help in the times in life when you need it. And we all have periods of time where we could do with talking to someone, whether it's a mate or a professional. So, obviously there's that psychological support that's now more readily available for free through your GP. There's a range of tools out there. Just the Thought is only one of many that can give you some really practical support in terms of working with difficulties and stress and anxious, negative thoughts. Having that must-do daily list for your well-being habits, getting good at knowing what you need to stay balanced. It might be, sleep, it might be exercise, it might be, certain types of eating or activities or anything spiritual or family-based. And being able to identify the signs of high stress and struggle and burnout, and having a way at running at it. What do I do when I notice, myself screaming inside and struggling? And when that stress goes up, how do I need to run at that so I can get things better on track? Identify and work to start reducing some of the traps and the barriers that you have in life, the stuff that gets you stuck. And have a good sounding board and a supporter that's there to talk to, someone that's really good at normalizing as well your challenges, and letting you know that other people are experiencing what you're experiencing too. So that is me. If you haven't yet checked out our tool, justathought.co.nz, it's a really great resource. It's absolutely free. It's available for all of you, and it's available for all of you to share with the people you support as well. So that's me.
Cool. Thanks, Anna. Hey, we've got a few questions come through. Do you mind doing a bit of Q&A?
Absolutely.
Okay. For the person who's, struggling to get past some trauma and panic attacks, what would be your advice there?
Look, that's really difficult. Panic attacks often happen when that trauma is really deep-seated and when it's really worked its way into our body and into our memories. I think, firstly, getting good at using relaxation breathing, because that sends a signal to the brain and to our sympathetic nervous system to calm down. Some of that basic, just being able to regulate that distress in the moment. There's mindfulness, which is great, being able to just ground yourself as that anxiety is escalating. But certainly, what I would suggest is this is definitely where touching base with someone that can help you and that can work with panic and can work with trauma to help teach you ways to process some of the stuff that's behind it is pretty essential. And don't think that you're alone. So many of us have experienced, these significant things in life. So take care.
Cool. Hey, what about, the whole stuff around entrapment and how we get caught up in our own little worlds. How do we move from being psychologically thin-skinned to psychologically thicker-skinned?
Yeah. Well, a really quick, fast answer, but I think that's pretty significant with that is it all goes back to our relationship with ourselves. If you don't have a good relationship with yourself, and if you don't have if you're not able to become a supporter of yourself when things get tough, you won't have a thick skin. You know, you will be sensitive to other people. You will be sensitive to the knocks and bumps in life, and you will take it personally. So, you know, the one big thing I think for us in this is that we must start building a better relationship with ourselves so that when things are difficult, we can become kinder and help to look after some of that distress and work out what we do next. That's when we develop a greater sense of hope. We feel that we've got more resources and that we can cope. So we don't tend to get as distressed when the shit hits the fan, because we know that we've got ourselves, we've got our back, and we're going to be able to cope. So that's the really critical thing. And the first thing is absolutely stopping that self-criticism, catching it when it's happening, noticing it, and stopping and thinking, instead, I'm distressed. What can I do to look after this right now? Cool.
Hey, when you're working with young people, you know, often they don't want to do the work. They just want it to feel good now.
Yeah.
What's your advice there?
Oh, look, it's hard. I think young people, and I think... I don't know if it's getting any worse today. I'm glad that I never grew up with Facebook or Instagram or social media, because, you know, I couldn't compare I didn't have this huge array of people, and these people that show this parts of their life that's just completely unrealistic. I think probably the first thing that I do with the young people that I work with and my own children is just to stop and validate and acknowledge what's going on. You know, if my kids come home and they've had a hard day and they tell me something, I'll say to them, "Oh, no wonder you're so upset. That sounds like it was really difficult." And I think for all of us, but for particularly young people, when they know we've got it, when they know that we've understood, whether they've given us all the details or just some of the details, if they really identify that we get it, that we get them, it holds them. And it gives them this sense of reassurance. And, you know, this is the same with any human being where we can validate. So that's probably the most important essential skill in helping young people to start off with. And then that opens the way to further conversations, further support, all the rest of it.
Yeah, I guess following on from that, you know, I think of my own teens and how they come slowly to a realization that sometimes their peers aren't necessarily a good influence on them or a good thing, but they kind of struggle with the whole defriending thing. You know?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And let's be honest, as an adult, we just ghost people. But I guess it seems to be, for the sensitive people, that's a harder thing to do.
It is, and because if you think about it, you know, one of our primary goals as human beings is to stay part of the group. And so when we get rejected by someone, it can, and especially if we've been rejected before and those core belief systems are that I'm not good enough or what, you know, that's floating around, it really triggers that. And all of a sudden it becomes this great threat to us. You know, well, what if other people see me like this too? You know, what if other people are upset with me or whatever it might be? So I think, you know, what I always say to my kids is I've taught them very early on, which was one of the most helpful things that I've realized, is that, you know what, other people struggle too. And sometimes other people's behavior towards you is a reflection more on what's going on with them and how they're feeling. And it's got maybe nothing to do with you. So I think it's that creating that boundary and that awareness that, you know, as human beings, we're very good at projecting our problems onto other people. And so, you know, don't always personalize what happens. Yeah.
Hey, just one final one, and it's going from one end of the continuum to the other. We've got older people that were either in our lives or they might be elderly people we know, and they can obviously get anxious or depressed. The world can look a bit gloomy out there if you watch too much of the news. What would be, you know, how do we look after those people?
Oh, look, so I think older people are just some of the most precious resource to us. And I think it's sad. I think you can hear it at that age. I think there's a real risk of feeling totally disempowered, and feeling like, there's no ability to have any effect on the world, and that people are losing sight of you. I think, when people that are older in their older years get to a space where they see themselves almost as redundant, that's when there's the greatest risk for feeling disempowered and having mental health difficulties. So I think, the older that I've gotten, the more that I've realized that, we really must respect our elderly people. We must utilize them. We must spend time with them and listen to them and hear their knowledge and wisdom and be able to reinforce for them that their experiences and their knowledge is valid, and allow them to see it having an effect on our lives. I don't have enough older people in my life, sadly, having lots of people sort of passed away over the years, but I love to connect in with people and valid, and just be able to go, oh God, you're so amazing, look at everything you've been through, and it just really bolsters them, and it helps them to feel effective, and helps them to develop confidence. So I think it's all that whakawhanaungatanga.
Yeah, they are a taonga, there's no doubting that, and we're blessed to have them with us. Hey, everyone, I think we've come to the end of our session. Anna, you're comfortable sharing the slides after this?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, some of them are aligned to other sort of psychological theories and people out there, and others are more my sort of take and thoughts on 41 years of living and 20 years walking alongside people. But thanks everybody for joining, and I'm sorry I've thrown a whole lot of information, but like someone just said, it's out there to watch. So if you can bear to tolerate me again, you can watch through and catch up on little clips and snippets. But feel free to get in touch if you want to know more about our tool, how to use it in your practice or within your organization. And everyone, just look after yourself, not just during Mental Health Awareness Week, but full stop, so take care.
Okay, I just want to, after everyone else's things, everyone's thanking you. You've been fantastic. Hey, thank you for kicking off Mental Health Awareness Week with Grow. Anna, it's been a pleasure. Go well, everyone. Have a great
Take care,
session.
everybody out there. Look after yourself. Ka kite.
Bye.
Bye.